First of all, I would like thank you very much for the invitation and the possibility to present a little bit different perspective because I would like to concentrate on the connections with Nubia or any kind of ceramic implications related to the southern neighbor of Egypt. At the beginning, I would like very briefly present the historical outline where we are, because I would like to concentrate on the 6th and 7th century, which are quite crucial in the history of both countries. I don't want to concentrate on Egypt because most of us will very known very well. We know the history of Egypt. But I would like you to remember that in the mid of the 7th century, there is this big change, end of the Byzantine Empire rule in Egypt, and start a new state, new religion. So it's a completely different new reality. I will concentrate on the Middle Nile Valley, which might not be so much familiar for you. So there, the situation was a little bit different. In the end of the 4th century CE, there is a formation of 3 kingdoms: Nubia in the north, Makuria more or less between the 3rd and the 5th cataract, and Alwa, the southernmost kingdom. The emerge of those 3 kingdoms occurred after the collapse of the vast kingdom of Meroe. How those states formed and so on, I mean, it's not the most important here, but one of the, let's say, huge milestones of the Nubian history is that in the mid-6th century, those 3 kingdoms were Christianized and missionaries came from Constantinople, so the heart of the Byzantine Empire, not from Egypt. Although, of course, Nubia was in the, let's say, daily life or economic way more related with Egypt than, of course, with the Constantinople itself. But so we have the situation that there is a arrival of new faith into Nubian mid-6th century, while in 100 years later, Egypt is not Christian country anymore. So what is happening? Nubia is a little bit cut from the roots of their Christianity, and this is important for understanding the whole cultural processes happening there that I will not be talking about because I would like to concentrate on the 6th and 7th century. But what is happening? I mean, Arabs, after very successful campaign in Egypt, they also arrived to Dongola, to Nubia, and in Dongola they were just stopped. So this is also another, let's say, milestone, I think, important for today topic. And last but not least, somewhere in the mid-7th century or end of the 7th century, there was a unification of Nubia and Makuria. So then there was only Makuria, the big state named by Włodzimierz Godlewski, like Great Makuria. I'm telling you this also because I will use in this presentation often examples from Dongola, and I'm using them, I will use them, because Dongola was the capital of this kingdom of Makuria, the Great Makuria, and within the pottery production and other aspects of the material culture, somehow Old Dongola influenced other regions, also Faras, so the former, so the capital of the former Nubia kingdom. But to connect these two regions, so Upper Egypt and Nubia, I will use mostly examples of two monasteries on, let's say, on the border somehow. So Deir and Bahadra in Aswan, roughly speaking, and Kasserwis, which we understand now as a part of large, let's say, metropolis of Faras. So in the 6th century, capital of Nobadia. Beginnings of those two monasteries fall somewhere roughly in the 6th century. For Kasserwis, it will be half of the or mid of the 6th century, just after the Christianization. So this is for the similarities, but for differences, the heydays for the Bahadra was 6th and 7th century, but for Kasserwis, much more later period. Nevertheless, they both somehow declined in the 13th century, but occupation in Bahadra after the 8th century is still unclear what is happening there. How the monastic movement was strong, if it was any, or it was only a place visited by pilgrims. Both monasteries, they have evidence of archaeological evidence of economic activities like food processing workshops located on the upper terrace of Deir and Bahadra, and here it's the picture on the bottom left with remains of mills, olive press, wine production, and so on. Also on the upper terrace, a little bit south west of this food processing area, there is a pottery kiln where most probably the Aswan, so-called Aswan amphora, were produced. And for the Kasserwis, we have storing and cooking facilities presented on the other picture, with some storage facilities, storage vessels. This area was very well connected with the refectory of the monastery. So it was a quite well organized space. Let's say in a quite similar way like Deir and Bahadra. So of course the pottery that we found in both monasteries comes from the market. It was available on the local market, so I will use those examples to illustrate a little bit the situation on the markets in the 6th and 7th century around. For Deir and Bahadra, we have the situation that most of the monastery was excavated by Monrad de Villard, who left some, let's say, leftovers of deposits. So there was very little to excavate, but still, I assume that those deposits can be used as samples for the statistics. Therefore, with quantification, we see that most of the amphora came from local production centers, maybe from the monastery itself. The other large group were Egyptian amphora 7, and among them, very often were vessels manufactured in Esna or Edfu, so eventually not in a long distance excuse me, from Aswan. What was surprising for me is that there were absolutely, except of 2 examples of this imitations of LRE 1 amphora from the beginning of 8th century. There was no typically commonly found LRE1, LRE4 amphora that you can find them in most of the late antique sites in Egypt. Here they were absolutely not present. I thought that, okay, maybe this is just a example because we didn't excavate everything. We had very limited deposits to excavate. But then I compared this to other excavated deposits from monasteries or cities along the Nile Valley, and I came to conclusion that if there will be any LRE1, LRE4, they will be there. I mean, in Deir el-Naklon, in the Fayum Oasis, which is a little bit on the back, it's not in the, let's say, middle of the road. They were in almost context dated to the 6th, 7th century. So if they will be in Al-Bahadra, I think that we would find at least one fragment. Therefore, if they are not here and we have predomination of Aswan amphora, it means that at least for those monks, we can assume that they concentrated their alimentation on the local production and presence of the amphora kiln that you can see on the pictures might suggest that those monks, they were really independent and having economy on their own, producing everything on their own, consuming. Because if we will go to the tablewares, we can see that also most of the finds from the 6th, 7th century came from local Aswan markets. But this is just a small digression. I will come back to the topic of amphora. But if we will see transport vessels from Kasserowes, we see a little bit different situation. This is what we would expect for Al-Bahadra. The point is that for the Kasserowes, the situation was also not convenient for a ceramicist, I might say, because this site was excavated by George Scanlon in the 60s, while the UNESCO campaign. So they were, rescuing works, and in the 6-week campaign, they excavated whole monastery. So there we have a very limited collection of sherds that were brought to the US, and now they are in the Oriental, now Isaac, in Chicago. But still, this collection, quite, let's say, subjectively organized, still it contains examples of imported vessels. I cannot say anything about the quantification, but still at least few examples of those vessels were present there. So again, comparing those two monasteries, that they are not so far one from another, it seems that they presented a little bit different economic strategy. Maybe because Kasserowes, as I said in the beginning, was eventually part of a large urban center, Faras. But if we look on Al-Bahadra, on the other side of the Nile, there is Aswan. So they could also use large market, but from one reason or the other, they didn't. The amphora from Aswan are present in Nubia in various sites in different quantities. and they are usually associated with Bact, so the economical agreement signed between Egypt and Nubia after this attempt of conquest, which what we now would understand was just a confirmation of kind of earlier agreement that economically joined those two regions. Why I'm saying this? Because usually the traditional, let's say, approach is that within this agreement, Nubia was sending gold, slaves, and other products or resources to Egypt, and in return, they were granted with large quantities of Egyptian wine brought in amphora. But the quantities of Aswan amphora that we found in Nubia, they are absolutely not corresponding with this idea. And I will show you in a moment why. I will stop with amphora because they are elements of this, let's say, let's call it the Byzantine package. This is, let's say, not very formal term that we are rather using this, let's say, as a working hypothesis. And it was brought by Dobrochna Zielińska while one of our long discussions. Nubian amphora started to be produced somewhere in the mid of 6th century within setting a huge pottery production center in Old Dongola, so the capital of the kingdom. So we can assume that they had possible resources to set this large center. Possibly those resources were coming not from the private, let's say, investment, but quite state-like organization. Here I give you an example of organization or distribution of kilns at the site, possible reconstruction made by Krzysztof Pluskota, who excavated few of those kilns and concentrated his works in this area. Why I'm showing this? Because this appearance of Nubian or Dongolese amphora was influenced or anyhow related to Aswan. The first amphora, they are very similar to Aswan amphora in shape. You can see this ribbed body and ended up with this pointed bottom, exactly like Aswan amphora. The first sets of Dongolese amphora from mid-6th century up to the 7th century, possibly even 8th. They are made of local kaolin clay that is still available in the region. It's like 400 meters, 500 meters from this pottery production center, and it resembles a lot the Aswan wares. It's doable to distinguish those two within the macroscopic observation, but with the first look, they are really looking alike. And before we excavated nice, quite well-preserved assemblage of Aswan amphora, it made a lot of confusion to archaeologists working in Dongola, because I found several Dongolese amphora misnamed as Aswan amphora, but they were not. Anyway, appearance of amphora was strictly related with arrival of Christianity, but not only as vessels used for wine transportation that was used for liturgy, but also as a kind of cultural change or trying to fit into this Byzantine world willingly, not falsely. As an example of this, I'm showing you a case study from one of the storerooms from the palace in Old Dongola, comparing quantities of different amphora type between the second half of the 6th century and deposits of the 7th century. We see that amphora from Aswan, they were quite abundant, but within the 7th century, we can see that the quantity of local amphora grows super fast. And this is, of course, my hypothesis, but I would suggest that this increased production that reflects in this context was related with willing independence from the Egyptian market. So this will contradict the idea of backed, although amphora from Aswan were still very much welcome, but I would hypothesize that the kingdom of Makuria, they preferred to be independent, to apply this economic strategy to have their own amphora and their own wine production. For the latter, there is attestation from the 9th century Arab traveler who's describing vicinities of Dongola as greenish and full with vineyards, possibly located in the Leti Basin north of Old Dongola. This is kind of, geologically very well settled place for agriculture, and this is possibly, it was the agriculture hinterland for Old Dongola. If we come back to the tablewares, as I told you, for Daran Bahadra, there is almost exclusively 99.9% of Aswan wares. I didn't record any even small fragment of fine wares from North Africa. Although there is one fragment, I don't know if you see, oh yeah, you see the arrow. This one, I would like you to remember this one because I will show you later on. This is something which is out, it's a specimen outstanding from the whole assemblage. But if we look on Kasserwies, similarly to amphora, we can see that the repertoire comprises Aswan wares, local wares, wares imported from the south, from Alwa. This is this funny example with a attached boss with a face of kind of animal. So this also confirms that monks at Kasserwies, they had access to more diversified products on the market. Talking about the tableware, some of the vessels were also related to this so-called Byzantine package that arrived into Nubia within the arrival of Christianity. Here I gave you the example of a plate with this down turned rim that we all very well know, not only from Egypt, other parts of the Mediterranean. And here we go in the second half of the 6th century and in the 7th century, in the kilns in Old Dongola, we found examples of local imitations of those words. Later on, they disappeared, although at the beginning, this is part of the whole Dongolis, the early Dongolis production, they were very much like products from Egypt. They simply imitated not only shapes, but also they kept decorations at the minimum, the kind of minimalism that it's very strange for the Nubian pottery in various periods. And then within 8th century, they start to come back to their indigenous traditions. But talking about indigenous traditions, the same time that we have imitations and of amphora and plates, we have also, I called this the indigenous package, vessels that follow earlier or continue or just use the Meroitic inheritance in a little bit different version that differs between regions. I give you examples from Anbahadra, from Kasserwis, from Dongola, and from Soba, so the capital of the southernmost kingdom. The distributions of the vessels is presented here. And this example on the drawing I showed you, the beginning, that for the tableware that it's important, it is this little guy here. And also this vessels analogous to this one were found in Hisson al-Bab, and this is information from Pamela Rose. Therefore, we see some connectivity between different regions, at the time different Nubian kingdoms, but also Upper Egypt, or at least the most southern part. I told you that those vessels, the idea comes from earlier period, and this is mostly work done by Krzysztof Pluskota, who work on those small bowls that we called pluskotki from his name. So if you look at the single separated motifs, whitish with black borders placed on red slipped surfaces, this is the idea that comes from the Meroitic kingdom, but the repertoire of motifs is different for, of course, for the pre-Christian era and the Christian. So you can see that the idea of this crescent moon from the Meroitic period was transformed somehow, where the cross replaced the Ankh cross. So this is a really important element that joins the pre-Christian and Christian era and shows how those dynamics looked like. Here I'm to show you to illustrate the best my idea. I show you the vessel that was found in pre-Christian Tumuli burial, and a bowl that was found in the so-called the foundation deposit from one of the earliest Dongola churches. So from one hand, we have this indigenous tradition that is, let's say, deeply rooted. And on the other hand, we have foreign ideas that they are very easily, very welcomely are merged to the Nubian pottery production, or let's say in the wider sense, economy. What we see from the exchange directions of exchange, that we can note supplies coming from Egypt to Nubia, but in return, in this period, there is very little attestations. What I know, I could find, there are few in Aswan. So it looks like it's this way around, but this is not according to the chronological frames of this presentation, but for the 10th, 12th, and 12th century and Bahadra, we see the reverse situation. There are more Nubian wares. So then somehow the situation has changed. But for the 6th, 7th century, it looks like more relations is on the line Egypt-Nubia than Nubia-Egypt. And at the end, I would like to, of course, thank you for your attention and thank you for all the expeditions and projects that kindly shared the materials with me or allowed me to work with them. Thank you so much.